Mirasee.
Nonprofit organizations do use finance, but their return on investment is not measured in how much money they get back. It's in a changed society. How many homeless people did we shelter overnight? How many children did we educate and give them a leg up on their future? How many single mothers did we help? Just all of these different societal problems that really need this kind of thinking about how do we maximize the use of our money.
I'm Sharon Richmond, and this is To Lead is Human. For nearly 40 years, I've run a business called Leading Large. I coach C-level executives to have greater impact, clarifying their priorities, energizing their organizations, adapting their personal behaviors, and through this, building cultures of accountability and respect that drive the success of their business. My guest today is Jonathan Ankney. Jonathan is the founder and CEO of Small Business CFO, where he helps small businesses and nonprofits build financially resilient operations. Jonathan, I'm so grateful you could join me today.
Sharon, it's great to be here and to see you.
Thank you. So I typically start the show by asking my guests to summarize their leadership philosophy. So from a high level, how would you describe the way you think about leadership?
I think of leadership as being a person who is leading by example. To my team, I want to be the type of person, manager, CEO who does work just the way my team does, to show them the lessons that I've had in the past from working with clients. And I know this is going to sound a little bit, I don't want to define it in terms of negativity, but I don't want to be the boss that I experienced when I was coming up through the ranks.
And so many leaders, I think, have that, it's a little bit like what we say when we're teenagers about our parents, like, I'm never going to be that kind of parent. But I think you're right that we do learn about leadership by what doesn't work for us when we're coming up through our own ranks. So what are some of the things that you are countering?
I would say lack of responsibility. I worked for people who would not take ownership of their own decisions, would not take responsibility for the way that they were doing things. I look at one manager that I had as just being very authoritarian, and I don't know how else to say this. She had a leather whip it coiled up on her wall, and that was her power symbol. And that just simply is not the type of person, that's not who I am to begin with, and that's not the type of environment that I want to create for my team. And I want them to know what's going on, but to know that this is an environment. Actually, one of our team values is grace. Like, I want the team to know that while there's accountability, there also is grace. We understand that we are human. To lead is human, to work is human, to be a human is human, right?
Absolutely. So you founded Small Business CFO back in, I think, 2004?
Yes.
And over these 2 decades, I imagine that your leadership style has had to evolve significantly. So can you describe a little bit about how it's shifted from the early days to today?
Well, certainly, because in 2004, I was leading me. Now I'm leading a team of 6, which doesn't seem like a large team, I'm sure, compared to some of the organizations that you're working with, many of them. But at the same time, it's what I've grown to at this point. So before I was leading myself, and it was just simply get up in the morning, check the bank account. No, we better work today, and then get to it. But now it's a very different matter, and it's definitely a mind shift for me to be thinking about, okay, what does it mean for me to be leading a team and to giving them the space to do their thing, to do things in their style, to get the same results that I got, perhaps at a different path, but at the same time still be monitoring, stepping in, watching, shepherding.
Yeah, and I think some of what I think you're talking about is the struggle that a lot of entrepreneurs face with this idea of scaling our leadership. So, the challenge from starting out doing everything yourself to then leading others to deliver the work. And so I know that you have grown kind of slowly and steadily until the last couple of years. How did you recognize that you needed to transition into this scaling of your leadership?
I'm not sure when I began to realize it. It's not that I woke up one morning and said, dude, you're a leader now. So you have to go to leadership school and become a leader and, wear a label that says leader. It just didn't happen that way. It just happened more gradually. So I'm going to go back in time a little bit to talk this out. I think that the first introduction to leadership for me, and I hadn't even thought about it, but it was very subtle, was through Toastmasters, the public speaking organization. And I joined Toastmasters with the idea that I would become a public speaker, that I would go and train entrepreneurs on financial management and help them understand these different concepts. But a key component of Toastmasters has always been leadership. And leadership for them would start out with things such as, well, we want you to lead a meeting. We want you to lead a special event, and to gradually begin to build you up into it until the last project in Toastmasters, before you became what's known as a distinguished Toastmaster, is a high performance leadership project where you say, I'm going to do a project that's going to move me from point A to point B. I'm going to have a committee of other people that I'm accountable to in order to explain to them, this is what the project is. These are the steps that I'm taking in order to do it. And then engaging in that. And for me, it actually was about beginning to lead my team. So I figured if I'm going to do a project, I might as well apply it to my trade, right?
Exactly. And of course, the whole point of scaling, and I don't know, when you started out, did you think you'd just have a solo business and you just do it yourself? Or did you think that you were going to grow it into a little enterprise?
I didn't think I was going to grow into anything until I read the E-Myth Revisited. And in there, Michael Gerber talks about how being able to hire bright, but not necessarily trained in the trade people to work for you. And I had several interns early on. And what I learned about working with interns is that they were wonderful people. They were bright, and certainly they were less expensive than hiring professionals. But at the same time, they were looking for experience. So after 9 months or a year, they would want to move on to a different job in order to get more experience.
So I think when you and I first met, I think you were trying to replace yourself in the business. I think is how you
Jonathan Jr.
described it.
Yes,
Say it
Jonathan
again.
Jr. That's what we were
Jonathan
looking for.
Jr.
Yeah.
So that's one way to think about it. What has unfolded as you've been working to build that team?
My first thought is that Jonathan Jr. doesn't really exist. I'm never going to quite find someone like me, and perhaps in some ways that's a good thing. Because if I had someone that thought exactly like me, probably a few different things would happen. Number one is that we would be duplicating me, and duplicating oneself is not necessarily best for the organization. It doesn't bring fresh ideas in. Who knows? I might even find out that I don't like Jonathan Jr. because he has the same quirks that drive me up a wall about myself, and I already live in my own head. So it's not necessarily a good thing to have a Jonathan Jr. Completely replicated. I think nevertheless that, especially in the financial industry, you certainly want to be hitting certain markers in terms of your deliverables and the quality of them. And so for me, I would say part of it is that I tell my team often, look, we have to hit these certain bottom lines. We have to hit these certain markers. We have to have this level of performance in order to do well. I also recognize that each of you have your own inclinations about the best way to do things, your own preferences for about how to do things. I don't want to get in the way of that. I will tell you, however, that if you don't meet the standards that we're setting, then we're going to talk about how I do it and why it may be leading to the result that we want. It's where do you lean into enforcing the practices that you've learned over time to get the results you want versus stepping back and saying you have the freedom to do that.
Yes. And I'm going to ask you, many founders experience what we sometimes call founder syndrome, where letting go of control becomes really difficult, even when you know it's necessary for growth. So have you had to wrestle with this? And if so, how have you worked through it?
I would say that I am wrestling with it. And right now, I am the one on the mat, and the referee is at about count 8.
What does this mean to the rest of us?
To talk more to Sharon Richmond about learning how to be a better leader and to let go of control.
So it's a struggle for you. What are you doing to stretch yourself?
I am stretching myself actually as we speak. I am having conversations with Craig, who's my number 2 person, about beginning to take over some of the leadership of the team. Just a little bit of background. We have a number of people that are working for us, including people who are overseas. We do have 2 people that are overseas in the Philippines. And I would say that everybody on our team they're wonderful. They're smart. They have great personalities. They work well with clients. We have some nonprofit clients. I know for a fact that at least one person on our team actually they contribute to our nonprofit organizations. That's just their heart is really in the business, and their intent is for our clients. So everybody is willing and is smart, but they don't necessarily see the whole picture, and they haven't necessarily done all of the types of work that I have done, or that even Craig has done, for example. So it's a matter of skill and experience. So what I said to Craig was, I need someone to go and just simply look at the metrics, go into what's important to us in terms of client satisfaction are going to be timely, accurate financials, payrolls done accurately on time, responding to clients' messages. Craig, just go into our systems and make sure that these are being done. And if something appears to be going outside of the boundaries of how we want to deliver things, then go ahead and alert me to that. So we're working on that. We had a call earlier today where I showed him the types of reports that I imagined we could be using so that he could be monitoring those. And again, because when you have a team that's willing and smart, it doesn't take a lot of work to guide them.
I'm going to push a little bit on that because, yes, a team that's willing and smart, but also an organization that welcomes people in as themselves and creates a place where they can ask questions, maybe make mistakes and get corrected, but not feel always as if their job is in jeopardy. And so maybe it's a little more than just their skill and their capabilities, but also the climate that you've created in the organization.
I appreciate that perspective. Had not quite thought of it that way before, or maybe in quite those terms. But I would say, actually, I laugh as I say this. So we did a round of interviews last December, and there was someone who we liked, who advanced along. Ultimately, she did. I'll just say right now, she ultimately didn't work out because she just declined the job. It was life circumstances were getting in the way. But we had her interview with Craig and then another accountant on our team, Debbie, just because I figured it would be good to have 2 additional people interview her together to be able to have some Q&A without me on the call, just because that I think would help the candidate feel more at ease and possibly answer things differently. And certainly my team members, as time goes on, have more on the ground experience than I do because I've been extracting myself from the day-to-day of a lot of client delivery. So they're interviewing her, and the candidates said to them, well, tell us a little bit about what the culture is like at Small Business CFO. So Craig is relaying this story to me, where it's on Zoom. There's Craig, there's Debbie, the other accountant, and me. And Craig's telling me this candidate, asked this question. He said, and Jonathan, I really don't want you to take this the wrong way. Please don't take this the wrong way. But what I said to her was, and I really don't want you to take this the wrong way, Jonathan. He said, Jonathan's the type of person who really cannot work for anyone else. So he had to create his own job, and therefore he created this company. And Craig said, what I told her is, it is going to be a very different environment than anything you've ever worked in before. And it's going to feel very different at first. But he said, by the time you get over that hump, it will actually be the best place you ever worked.
Oh, that's so terrific. What a compliment.
Made my day, week, possibly even month. Yeah, it just
I am not
says a
surprised.
lot. Yeah.
Well, so the transition from entrepreneur to CEO requires different skills. And you've talked about this moving from being the person who knows all the client details and all the needs of the customers to someone who's empowering other people to make decisions. What's been the hardest part of this evolution for you?
Downloading my brain. And what I mean by that is helping my team see what I see when I look at financials. Every one of our clients, their financials are different. We work with organizations that are very similar in terms of what they do, but each of them will set up their financials differently because these are individual executive directors, and CEOs, and they think about their business. Well, I structure my revenue this way and my expenses this way. And the other one's like, no, 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 this is how I think about it. So they can be very similar organizations, but they look at things differently. So how do I take that perspective of this is how I learn about the client and what their preferences are and how they want their financials to this is how I analyze the financials and make sure that the financials are reflecting what I want my clients to see. Because ultimately, financials are about making decisions, right? So whatever gives them that insight, that's what I'm looking for, and that's my mindset. We're a small business CFO, not small business accountants. So the CFO wants to be able to make that decision, and they want their reports to help them, guide them, and to reflect back to them, this is the way my business is performing, and this is how I make a decision about how to reinvest in my business. So downloading my brain to help them see with similar eyes to what I have and how I look at things, helping them see where there's opportunity to present information in a way that the client had never seen before, and that possibly even I had never thought of before, helping them to get that perspective and to take on that mindset and that attitude and disposition.
We are speaking in June of 2025, and I say that because we're in the middle of a rapid acceleration in AI usage in businesses, and I'm listening to you, and I'm hearing a Jonathan GPT, a Jonathan Jr. bot. Have you considered creating such a download of your brain yet?
Why, yes, I have.
I
Would you
I'm
like to
really
know
glad to
more?
hear that.
Okay.
Tell us what you want to about it. It's really cool.
Well, just in short, I am, first of all, sometimes a little bit reluctant to go into technology. There's a technological inertia going on here. I won't reveal my age, but I grew up in the day before ATMs, for example. So, it's sometimes takes a while to adapt to new technology. But I was inspired one day by someone who said, well, I've been taking my recordings from webinars and calls that I had on Zoom that we had recorded, and I'm taking the transcripts of those and loading them into ChatGPT and asking it, well, tell me, how do I think? What patterns do you notice about my approach to dealing with these different problems? And I said, all right, you know what? My inertia has just been overcome because I now have a note taker that is recording most, I would say probably 90% of the calls that I have. I mean, there's a few one-offs that it's like, this is not going to be worth it. But especially around when we're doing analysis on client financials, or if we're talking about internal systems, when we have our weekly team meeting, for example, I'm recording those because the goal for me then is going to be to take those transcripts eventually. I'm sorry, to have my assistant take those transcripts and put them into ChatGPT for me, and then for me to sit down on a Saturday morning and just say, all right, let's go to it. Tell me what Jonathan thinks like.
Oh, that's gonna be so fun. I've done a little bit of that myself, and it really is it's so eye-opening. Back to the leadership opportunities. So your background combines finance and arts administration, which I think is kind of unique. How do you think this dual perspective influences your approach to leading or to thinking about business success in general?
Just a little bit about my background, and I think this is going to help explain both my journey and possibly be encouragement to anyone who's out there who's very creative. So I grew up in a very musical family, and my parents never pushed me into a career necessarily, but just it was kind of like, well, son, you play classical trumpet. Oh, we just love seeing you in the orchestra like that. Well, the next thing I knew, I was getting a degree in music performance, which I have labeled the world's most useless degree. Now, I know that's not the case because I've had actors telling me that their degree was the most useless degree. Uh, but we will save that debate for another day. I spent several years afterwards. My first job out of college, I was a bicycle messenger, just to show you. And I graduated with highest honors. So it goes to show how useful it really was. I spent several years out of school temping and being in different office environments, which was very helpful actually for me. And So I temped, and then it's like 2 years afterwards, I like either rededicate yourself to music or decide to do something else. Took a career aptitude test. The results came back and they said, you are quite an anomaly. We have never had someone that had polar opposite personality traits on this test. You are 50% artistic and 50% administratively oriented. I said, well, that's interesting. Went out. I lived in Philadelphia at the time, was out on the main line, did a wedding, got on the train back to Philadelphia, and there's a buddy of mine from music school on the train. Hey, Rob, how you doing? Things are all right. How are you? Oh, things are okay too. I just got finished doing a wedding. Rob, what are you doing these days? Oh, well, I'm getting a degree in arts administration. Really? Tell me more. Long story short, I ended up going to a business school program that had an arts administration component in it, just a small unit. It was 12 students per year. And that's where I ended up taking classes in grant writing and legal issues as applied to the arts. But in addition to just marketing and accounting and all these different basic core management classes, I decided at the time that I wanted to double major. I had worked as a temp at a bank for a while, and I was interested in money. For some strange reason, I like money. So I talked to the finance professor and I talked to the accounting professor. Both told me that I should double major in accounting rather than finance because nonprofit organizations do not have money to invest. I did something I never did before, and that is I rebelled. I did not take accounting as recommended by both professors. I took finance classes. So corporate finance, portfolio theory, international finance, all these different types of things. The last week of my schooling, I sat down with the finance professor and I said, Professor Ramirez, I just want to let you know that I listened to your advice and ignored it and became a finance major. And what I learned about finance and nonprofit organizations is that nonprofit organizations do use finance, but their return on investment is not measured in how much money they get back. It's in a changed society. How many homeless people did we shelter overnight? How many children did we educate and give them a leg up on their future? How many single mothers did we help? Just all of these different societal problems that really need this kind of thinking about how do we maximize the use of our money. So this is a very long background, I understand, but coming out of that, I worked a few different jobs because I was going into nonprofit organizations that needed accounting help. I had a finance degree, but I had to learn how to do accounting in these organizations, so I became a management accountant is what it is. I'm not an auditor, I'm not a tax person, I'm a management accountant. So I approach our work with this finance philosophy, looking at accounting and doing accounting. And with all of this background, now the question is, well, what does a person who has an arts background, no leadership skills, and has decided to start his own business, how does he become a leader? And I think that the result of that is that I probably think very creatively about the solutions that we need and take that creativity and take that same, I care about society, I care about my team. So how do I become that leader that lived the life, has practiced the trade, has been in the trenches, who knows what it's like to have a client effectively yelling at you about something that actually the problem they originated themselves? How do we deal with that? So I have all of these experiences. It's a very, very rich background after 2 decades of doing this, but we only began having a team really about 5 years ago. Before that, it was the Jonathan show with a couple of part-time people, and now it's very different. So, taking that and trying to transfer that and get that knowledge and encapsulate it and into a way that everybody understands what's going on. So it requires, first of all, as a Class A introvert, it requires me actually talking to people on my team, which I love talking to them, but at the end of the day, it's like, all right, well, let's go off and just kind of breathe air and not talk to anyone for a while we recover.
Class A introvert. That makes sense. So what I'm hearing you describe, Jonathan, is a creative perspective on how to help these small businesses and nonprofits, help them focus on and achieve and measure their journey on the way to their mission delivery. That's what I'm hearing, I think, as the blend of this background, which a lot of small business owners and nonprofits don't really feel very comfortable looking at financials, it's not a language that they always speak. So let me ask it this way. You've helped well over 200 small businesses and nonprofits so far. And you must see patterns in the leaders in these organizations. So what are some of the leadership challenges you've noticed among your clients who are leading these small businesses and nonprofits?
I think that the challenge that small organizations have many times is that they are started by people who understand what they do. They understand, let's go back to Michael Gerber's book. The business that he uses there is his model or as his sample in this fable is all about pies. So Sarah, the young lady, knows all about pies. She doesn't know about running a small business. She doesn't know about leadership. She doesn't have a team. She's baking pies. She's burning herself out because she's baking pies all the time. And I think that a lot of small businesses struggle. The owners, and in the case of nonprofits, the executive directors struggle because oftentimes they come up through the ranks of, well, I was working alone. Now I am doing, I'm just making this up. We don't have a client like this, but a videographer. I'm a videographer. I know about editing. I know about all of this stuff. I've done everything. I want to expand. So I'm going to hire my own editor. Or I'm going to expand first by getting a crew of part-time people that are going to be contractors for a while until I scale up to the point where I can just start to afford a full-time person, a full-time project manager, things like that. So they know their trade and they know the way they did it because that's the right way to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that they struggle with that, and they have never thought to themselves. And this is something that I've realized in the last several years. Every year, my job description changes. Every single year, my job description changes. In the last couple of years, I became VP of HR, right? Because we were recruiting. So I'm learning about HR and how that's done. So in the last couple of years, even though I've always been the CEO, it's all right. Well, you actually need to jack that up even further and get to the point where, listen, if you're going to be the CEO, that actually means it comes with its own set of tools, its own set of skills, its own set of attitudes. And some of them your personality is going to resonate with very well, and others is going to be alien to you. But this is part of leadership. If you're going to be a leadership, you're going to have to be flexible and change and adapt to the environment. Every time we add a new team member, I've got to adapt to this new team member and understand how they think and how to explain things to them in their language, right?
And it changes your team. Every time you have a new team member, you essentially have a new team, and the team needs to reground. What I think you're describing, at least how I'm hearing it, is you started out knowing how to work in your business and do the work of your business. You have had to stretch yourself to learn how to work on your business and build it with some intention so that it would become what you wanted it to be, and it's still becoming what you want it to be.
I would say so. I would definitely agree with that. And I think from what I understand about Elon Musk, he's the type of person, because he has an engineering background, he will go in and sit down and say, I will help you solve this problem if it's necessary. And I think that that's kind of the model that I'm looking at is like, listen, I'm trying to extract myself as much as possible. And there are times when I'm going to have to take myself off grid in order to both train myself and my team that, hey, you know what? Jonathan's not always going to be available. So we're going to have to figure this out on our own.
And with the Jonathan bot.
There you go. Well, you know what? I think that we can do the Jonathan bot, and we can also do the Jonathan bot in terms of implanting in every team member's minds. This is the small business CFO way of doing things.
Yeah. I guess I'm just thinking about all these leaders that you've helped get a new perspective on how to measure their effectiveness in their organizations.
I would say that's a part of it, but leading my clients, because I think
Yes.
that there's a difference between leading your team and leading your clients as well. And for me, and this is a very recent realization, it's like, wait a second, you're actually leading your clients too, because you said earlier, a lot of them are not used to looking at financial reports. Well, this means then that I need to be available to them in order to help train them to understand what is financials. Listen, I have a music degree that I had, the last time I played my trumpet was for my big sister's wedding, and I think that was 14 years ago. So, I'm not using that degree anymore, but the creative skills I am using. But now I'm looking at all these people that also have liberal arts degrees, many of them do, and it's okay. Guess what, folks? If I was able to figure it out, you can too. The good news is that you don't have to do it all yourself because I'm here to support you. And really, if I can be a leader to them in terms of showing them the path to not just financial skills, but also just simply this is how I organize things. And, I'm your trusted advisor and a confidant. So let's talk about what it might look like to help you work with your organization more. When I look at your financials, I'm seeing a symptom of a problem. The problem might not necessarily be financial, so let's talk about it.
I'm sure that sounds like a very coaching approach to partnering with your clients, a very educational approach, which sounds like I have to imagine they become very loyal customers because you're really helping them toward the things they care most about, which is the impact they want to have on the world. I love your story because I don't think most people think about accounting and finance as like a helping organization. But I think one of the most important things I learned in business school is that a real understanding of cost accounting helps you understand a business deep into the heart of the humans that are running it because there's so much detail that you can see. So, looking back at your leadership journey, what's one thing you wish you'd learned or changed sooner that would have made it easier for you to scale your own leadership?
Well, first of all, I wish someone had said to me when I started, or maybe when I first read the E-Myth Revisited, had said, and oh, by the way, if you want to scale your business, you are actually going to also need leadership skills. And now that I think about it, and I don't recall that leadership is ever mentioned in the book as being a part of the scaling, but nobody said that, and I never thought about it. So I think that that's one thing. The other thing is being prepared for healthy conversations. And when I say healthy, it's direct. There's a difference between being passive. There's a difference aggressive and being assertive, right? Assertive is
Definitely.
that being able to say what you say without having what I call too much pepper in the kimchi. Uh, but you know what I'm talking about, right? It's the
Yes.
one where I'm speaking my mind, but I'm not upset.
Yeah. And it's that two-way conversation of engaging with someone in the conversation so that it's both parties, not just a one-way directive.
I think it has to do with a number of things. I mean, one certainly is as one grows up, they have models that they look to in terms of how to deal with conflict and how conflict is handled. To begin with, I think that certain personalities probably deal with it better than others. But there's also, I think, a safety component to it and a trust in the relationship. And that the deeper the trust in the relationship, the easier it is to have these conversations. And, the beautiful thing about having ongoing relationships is that you can have multiple conversations about the same thing. And sometimes, it takes a little while to dip our toes in the water and think, okay, can we talk about this? How's this topic? Let me just dip my toe in the water and how loaded is it?
I mean, it's fair. I think most people feel that way when they're attempting to have that kind of kind and clear messaging. It's not so much necessarily nice, but we treating people with respect. I mean, everyone who listens to this podcast knows I'm very big on cultures of accountability and respect because when we treat each other like capable human beings worthy of respect, we can be accountable to deliver a lot more, each of us separately and all of us together.
Indeed. And I think that accountability and respect together, like it's sometimes I think it's a hard line to trod because there are times when it's like, darn it, you're not thinking like me. So
Yeah.
so this is how we do it. I mean, it's very easy to want to pound your fist on the table and say, this is what we do. And no, that's not the way to do it. And that destroys that trustful, respectful relationship as a result. And one of the things that I've had to do over time is to accept responsibility for the outcome. And I once had a boss say to me, he and his brothers owned a laundry. And I still remember that what my boss said to me was he said, if we asked someone on one of our employees to do something and it was done incorrectly, we always took responsibility as having communicated it wrong.
I think that's worth repeating. When you discover someone didn't complete something the way you thought it would be completed, the way you wanted it completed, to take responsibility for having not communicated it clearly enough for them to understand. That's powerful and brave, and the essence to me of accountability in leadership. So I remember once upon a time you mentioned something to me about discovering this book that talks about the zone of genius. And I seem to think that was a big aha for you in kind of shifting the way you were thinking about your role in the business. Am I remembering that, or am I making this up? I might be AI hallucinating.
You're not AI hallucinating. I don't think I ever told you this before, Sharon, but really my goal is to be able to impact at least 10,000 businesses.
I did not know that. I
Yeah,
love that.
it is my goal to do that. Now, certainly I don't expect that I will be able to do that with services, but also just education products and being able to do, let's say, public speaking, for example, things like that. I really want to have that kind of an impact. So for me, that means having the time to do things such as writing blog articles, being able to do video blogging, and to do courses, possibly training. I don't know, speaking from a stage, these are all ideas that I have, but this allows me to go back to my creative performing arts roots. And I'm not going to be able to have that impact that I want to have on the world and society if I'm constantly doing one-to-one. I'm going to have to start taking my time and doing one-to-many to do that.
Well, that sounds like it's going to invite you to some new leadership challenges. What do you think your learning edge is going to be there?
I think that it's going to be two ways because remember, I've been talking about leading my team and it's about leading the clients. So, first of all, the team's going to have to be larger. So, leading a larger team means a plethora of things. We're going to have to be dealing with new systems because the systems that we have now are not going to be the same systems that we have in the future. It also means that I'm going to have to be training leaders at that stage that I'm now teaching leadership to the next crew of people. And how are you going to lead your team? Let's just say of 4 to 10 people for client delivery services. John Maxwell, in one of his books, talks about, I think his concept is the lid. And the lid is the leaders underneath you will never exceed your leadership level. So you have to constantly raise that level so that they can continue to grow as you grow.
It is, I think, the rare entrepreneur that can have others work for them who are at a higher level. It's a real challenge to ego and humility. I think you're right. I think it's quite challenging.
Is that an attitude issue or is that a skill issue or is it both?
Yeah, I don't know how to separate it out. I think there's an element of personal psychology to it. Some of it may be making peace with the fact that others can do things better and that doesn't mean you're bad. It doesn't mean you're less than. And I think that's can be really hard for folks who especially started as you and I both did with our businesses being solo practices and growing past that. I personally love working with people that see things differently or faster or whatever than I do. It's like, when you want to improve your tennis game, they always say play with someone a little better than you because it gives you that stretch. And I think for people that have the ego capacity to do that, I think it is a very valuable way to learn.
Long term, if we are really going to scale, it's going to mean me getting, let's say, the equivalent of a chief operating officer. And that type of person in the I think it's in the Gino Wickman books is described as an integrator, the person who makes sure that the business runs smoothly. And for me, I think that it would be a little bit of a challenge giving up some artistic control, but at the same time, I think that as long as I'm aware of it, if and when the time comes that we recruit appropriately so that that person has that disposition towards operations in a way that, while I'm good at it, is not necessarily what I enjoy doing.
Got it. Yeah. If it's okay with you, I want to take a kind of a personal side journey and talk a little bit about faith-based leadership. And I know you've served on a church finance committee and you've written some about faith-based leadership. I'm curious if you're comfortable talking about it, how the principles from your faith journey inform how you think about your business and leading your business. And I guess I noticed just even that you used the word grace in the first place.
So just to give a little bit of background for the listeners, out of our clients, About half of our work is with for-profit organizations, and another half is with nonprofit organizations. Of that nonprofit sector that we work with, I would describe half of those as secular nonprofits that are doing something that have nothing to do with religious congregations, and then the other half we do. And they're typically churches. I grew up in a Protestant church, so it was just kind of a natural thing. But one call led to another, that led to another, and the next thing you know, we have a whole bunch of churches working with us. Now, the interesting thing is that, Sharon, I don't know if I ever told you this or not, but one day, one of our clergy introduced us to their neighbor that has a gay history podcast. And the next thing we know, we had him referring us to all these LGBTQ organizations. So half of our nonprofits are church-based organizations, the other half are LGBTQ organizations, and we love them all, and we're happy to serve them, because to me, this is part of how we help society heal. Really, is about that. So you go to the Christian scriptures and you see all sorts of stories about leadership. Certainly Moses led the children of Israel out of the wilderness, and he took them along the way, and he had faith, and the sea parted ways, things like that. Then he got mad and was angry and threatened to kill them all. God, strike them dead.
Right back to the Old Testament.
But we look at it and look, they were all humans.
That's
And
true.
right, they were all humans. They
Believe.
all had their moments of faith. They had their moments of non-faith. Let's go to the great King David, great warrior. In some ways, you could look at him as a leader and just think about this was a shepherd boy who learned about the warrior skills as a shepherd, and then went into the battlefield and did all of that. And he got comfortable in the throne, and the next thing you know, he's like, oh, this lady over here looks nice, but she's married. What are we going to do with her husband? And get him out of the way. So,
Yeah.
to paraphrase,
The foibles of humanity.
the foibles of humanity. There are certainly guiding principles and that I can look at, even from, I'll say, a non-faith-based perspective. And grace is certainly one of them that I want to apply to my team and to our clients.
Yeah. I know a lot of faith traditions emphasize kind of a servant leadership approach, and that's, I think, similar to kind of what you were kind of talking about, but it also can be really at odds with the assertiveness, as you mentioned, that's needed in business leadership. How do you manage that tension for yourself and your organization?
There's a patch of carpeting out in my living room that shows where I paced back and forth when I've needed.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing so hard at the image of that worn patch in your carpet. It's a great way to describe it, though. So you basically wear a path in your carpet until you sort it out.
That is the start, I would say. But over time, it's become pacing back and forth less. And I think it comes from two things. One is that the other day I was in an entrepreneurs group, and they were asking to give gratitudes. And I was the last one to speak, and I said, I'm actually grateful for the problems that I have, because these are what give me these experiences that I need to develop the skills that I need in order to become a better manager and a better leader and a better example to my team. So certainly there's that. And then the other part of it is just, learning to let go of things and to realize that, what, I've made it this far. I can certainly get through this next problem. It's not going to derail me from doing what I do. And really keeping your eye on the goal, and my thinking, keeping the eye on the goal of how do I live in my zone of genius? How do I help all these entrepreneurs? I can't let this, whatever it is, rob me of my joy today and hijack my brain and stay focused on that. If I'm really going to do what I need to do, then the sooner I get over this, the better.
There's such a powerful lesson in there in what you're saying about knowing what your care is, knowing what it is you care to be doing, this goal you've set of impacting 10,000 organizations. And that, holding that in front, I think does really help, at least in my parallel experiences, helps me make short-term decisions more quickly. Do you find that?
I can see that. That's for sure. I don't know that I necessarily always apply it, but the better I have that mantra and that vision in my mind as to how things are supposed to go. One of the metaphors that I use for us is that we're on a ship. I'm guiding the SS Small Business CFO through the economic waters that we have, through the small business environment that we have. And every one of my team is a crew member on this ship. And my love and value my team, my obligation actually is to the ship. And what that means then is that training and empowering a crew member to be a better crew member is important, but it also means that if there's something that comes up along the way that cannot be resolved, then I need to act quickly on that.
Yeah. So, as we're kind of moving toward wrapping up, I guess one thing I'd like to ask is, what's one mistake that you see entrepreneurs making repeatedly when they try to move from being the doer to the leader of doers? Like, what's the first step for them to take there?
Well, it's probably with a lot like me. It's just to recognize that you are a leader, and that means that it comes with a set of skills. I think being aware of, I don't want to call it a problem, but being aware of what's in front of you, that challenge that needs to be done, that the skills are changing, is probably the first step. And then the second part of it is, I'd say a lot of it's around just communication, and being able to communicate things. And I think that the sooner that a person who is several years behind me, shall we say, and that they are working with a part-time crew and are trying to figure out, okay, well, how do I make this, scale this into now having a full-time team? That's going to mean the sooner that you can understand your approach to things and your methodology, and to be able to being able to identify common situations that they find themselves in, and to define the outcome that they want and their approach to it as a guideline for people that they're bringing on is going to be very, very helpful for them.
Thank you. I focus a lot on language and its impact on culture. And of course, this podcast is very intentionally named To Lead as Human. So I do like to ask each guest, what does this mean to you?
I would start with just simply, we all are humans, and we come with gifts that we were born with. We come with skills that we developed over time. We also come with some things in the liability side of the balance sheet, shall we say? And you point out before that grace is a word that I've used repeatedly in terms of our environment. So certainly being able to have the grace to deal with those and to recognize those in myself as much as possible, and in my team, my clients, and trying to understand how to do that. But to lead as human also means that humans do need to lead, and leadership is going to look different for every person. And just think about it for a moment. Anyone with a child is a leader.
That is so true. I agree.
Anyone who takes on a volunteer position is going to be looked at as a leader. Sometimes people don't recognize that they are looked as leaders, but in their organization, the Elks Lodge, the synagogue, soup kitchen, whatever it is, because they're there volunteering, they're looked at as a leader. And perhaps even just a broader message is, to lead as human, you are a leader, you just haven't thought about it, and sit down and list all the ways that you are.
Oh, I love that, Jonathan. Thank you so much. That's just such a great place to part for the day, although we could talk about so much more. I'm going to guess that there are people who are going to want to know how to find out about Small Business CFO. So where do they go and how do they learn more about you?
They can go to our website, which is sbcfo.com, and that stands for Small Business Chief Financial Officer.com. There's an about page there. There's a contact page for us there, and I'm certainly on LinkedIn as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Jonathan, for sharing your time and your valuable experiences and insights with us today. I am so grateful to have had you here.
It's been a delight, and always great to talk to you, Sharon. A boatload of fun.
Boatload of fun. Thanks again, Jonathan. See you soon. Please stay with us for a moment, and I'll share some takeaways and a couple coaching tips to help you uplevel your own leadership, starting today. So one thing I've learned hosting this podcast is that every leader offers lessons that can be applied throughout the leadership journey, no matter the size or scale of your organization. That's not to say the C-level jobs are all the same. They're definitely not. And leadership definitely changes. So here are a few of my takeaways from my conversation with Jonathan. And I will suggest to you that every one of these can apply to you and your organization, no matter your size or scale. First of all, every year, your job description changes. And like all C-level positions, you should be always paying attention to what are these changes, because what your company needs from you changes, and not just yearly. So Jonathan emphasized every year his job changes, and he noted that in recent years he became, quote, the VP of HR when he needed to beef up his skills on recruiting. That's what the organization needed. This insight highlights that entrepreneurial leadership, again, no matter the size of your organization, requires constant adaptation and skill development. You just can't rely on yesterday's competencies to handle tomorrow's challenges without giving it some thought. So here's your tip. Once a month or once a quarter, sit down by yourself and list out what you're actually spending your time on versus what you thought you should be spending your time on. Check to see whether you've got new skills that you need or whether there are tasks filling your schedule that it's now time for you to delegate or automate or maybe even eliminate. This is what helps you stay ahead of the natural evolution of leadership responsibilities. Because as most C-level folks know, you've got to continue your development in order that your organization can continue to grow. The second thing Jonathan shared with us, which I found extremely powerful, is a lesson he said he learned from a former boss who told him, hey, if we ask one of our employees to do something and it was done incorrectly, it's our responsibility. We must have communicated it poorly. It represents a fundamental shift from blaming others for not understanding or knowing what to do to taking ownership for clarity and communication, which is a critical skill for all leaders, especially when scaling rapidly. The tip here is to take time and do a clarity check in advance. Before any important conversation or request, ask yourself, if this were to go wrong, how might I have poorly communicated? If I want this to go well, what do I need to communicate and how? You can then proactively address any potential gaps up front. And when something does go wrong, it's not blame and shame. It's ask, how could I have been clearer in what I shared with you? Instead of the automatic, why didn't they understand? Or why are they so slow? Let's admit it, we do sometimes say that in our own heads. The third takeaway, I think, is Jonathan's insight about needing to download his brain. And it raises the question, now that we have AI tools at our fingertips everywhere, to clone ourselves or not to clone. He identified his challenge in helping his team understand how he sees situations when he's analyzing client financials and making suggestions. And he decided to take AI transcription of his client calls and team meetings to create a first pass at a Jonathan bot. What can a Jonathan bot do? It can help team members answer questions, but most importantly, it helps Jonathan identify patterns and analyze his thinking and decision-making approach. This systematic approach to transferring knowledge is critical for every leader trying to scale beyond just what they can do themselves. Here's the weekly practice for this one. Keep a decision journal. Every week, record one significant decision you made, capturing the situation, the factors you thought about, your reasoning, and the outcome. I suggest that you record this directly into one of your AI agents and ask for help in recognizing what are your mental models, what might you be missing, what else could you have offered, and how do you evaluate whether or not your decision process is sound. Externalizing your mental models like this, so you can identify patterns and teach them to your team, will help you just like it's helping Jonathan as he is learning with his AI partner about his own expertise.